Mr. Ibrahim Dikko. It's nice to have you with us on Technology Times TV to basically look at the last 21 or more years of the rollout of GSM services in Nigeria, the yesterday, today, and tomorrow of that vibrant industry that we call telecommunications in Nigeria, in which you continue to play a top leadership role. Let's go back to the very beginning. And the first question we would like to ask you is, can you share with us what inspired your transition from banking into telecoms and how your early experience at first securities, discount house, resourcery, and all these other experiences in between have shaped your approach to leadership in the telecoms industry?
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Badru and Technology Times. It's a pleasure to always sit with you and talk about the industry that we are so keen on. Interesting question. I think in one word, what has shaped my thinking and is curiosity and the interest to learn. When we started FSGH back in the day, or First Securities Discount House, it was the first of its kind. So I like startups. Resourcery was not a startup, but we went for a lot of growth, expansion, new markets, which I liked. So when the opportunity to move into telecoms, full telecoms after doing IT came, again, it was that curiosity to do something new. The internet was fairly new still then, and growing. And, that curiosity to do something different, to go into another startup, starting from zero when the MTNs, Econets at the time, and Glo already had a 5-6 year head start. So I was curious to learn, curious to do something different, and maybe I'm a little restless in that regard.
From the vantage point, how has the Nigerian telecoms industry evolved since the entry of GSM operators in 2001? And what have been the key factors that are driving this transformation?
Well, in numbers, it's very easy to see the difference. Remember, 400,000 telephone lines in 2001 to 150 million today, and still growing. So that, in a nutshell, says it all. But what have been the key drivers? I think a couple of things. One, the regulatory landscape. A very strong Communications Act that was very clear was put in place. So investors, like in any industry, like certainty. So once there's certainty of regulation and clarity, then it's for you as a businessman to come in and put your money. Second, light touch regulation. So you're not over-regulated and being beaten over over every single thing. The guidelines are set, and operators are free to go and run their businesses as long as they do it within the ambit of the law. So those sorts of things really helped set it. And I also sort of say to people a lot that regulation is circular. It goes right in a cycle. So you start off from 2001 when there was a licensing round, and if you can remember, there was a big talk about is it going to be 2G, 3G, 2.7, 5G, whatever it was, and so on. And now nobody really wants to know whether it's 5G, 7G, or whatever. It is, can you provide the services? Can you solve the problems? So you go through the licensing, then the rollouts, then the maturity, then we're now going into softer things like, the real quality of experience. We've got a very strong consumer protection regime now, and industry, which is good. So people are more focused on that, those sort of what I call softer areas, but no less important. And of course, now we're going through, with technology changes, another cycle of refarming of spectrum and licensing will come again, as we talk about 5G and the future, AI and so on and so forth. So it's continuous.
Thank you for that. As a pioneer member of the team that established Etisalat Nigeria, now known as 9mobile, what were some of the significant challenges that the new entrant operator that it was at that time faced during the early days, evolving later into a formidable force, where you had the likes of MTN Nigeria, Airtel Nigeria, and Globe? And how did you and your team overcome these challenges?
Excellent question. I guess coming in 2006, 2007, we were a late entrant to the market. So, you already had operators who had been there 5 years or thereabouts, and 6 years. So when we sat down and did a lot of our planning, one of the key things we realized was we can't compete on price. You can't come in late, you're in the investment phase, and then you're the cheapest. Something will give. So we had to compete on quality. Quality of the network and quality of the experience for the user. So you deliver what you promise to the customers. So that set us apart. Secondly, we had a lot of support from our group, the Etisalat group, in terms of regulatory support. So in my team, for example, we were really front and center of a lot of those initiatives where we tried to use a variety of regulatory levers to gain a competitive advantage. So we got things like asymmetric interconnection rates regime, which is a very unusual and rare lever that is used in telecoms, but if you go around the world, it's rarely ever used. But I went out, made a case, and it was accepted. Again, there was, I think at the time, the regime of passing a certain amount of your traffic through the clearing houses. We got an exemption for that, from that until, for a set period, so that you were able to get up and running. So things like this were very key. It took a lot of work, a lot of position papers and so on, but then also a very proactive regulator that listened. If you came, you made your case, you had the facts, you had the figures and the justification, they were willing to listen and to grant you those regulatory supports.
Thank you. Your role as the Vice President of Regulatory and Corporate Affairs at Etisalat Nigeria then, you witnessed a number of policy and regulatory initiatives.
Yes.
And these initiatives played key roles in shaping and defining the telecoms industry as we know it today. Could you walk us through some of such initiatives that shaped the industry and the competitive landscape in Nigeria?
Okay. Yeah, I think, it's, as I said, something that happens in stages and phases. So when we started, there was no infrastructure. When telecom started, very little infrastructure in terms of towers, in terms of fiber that was laid out and so on. So some of the initiatives that came, either regulatory-led or operator-led, really did change and improve and speed up the development. For example, one of the things that we were very keen on to happen very quickly as a latecomer was mobile number portability. The numbers weren't massive, but they were very key to allow for choice. And for a small operator, that was something that was very good. The ability to share infrastructure. So the co-location and infrastructure guidelines came out sometime around those early days, that really also supported the ability to sort of buy space on an existing tower from somebody else that had that space on their infrastructure, or fiber swaps that started to happen. Those sorts of things were good for the industry. Some of them were just plain tough and difficult, like SIM registration. It was something that came as a result of the security challenges that we had in the country, and we had no choice but to do it. Now, it might have been a little easier for an operator that had, 5, 10 million subscribers as opposed to somebody that had 15 or 20 at the time. But all of us obviously complied and we did those things. So those were some tough things that happened. Also, we tested a lot of things around the competition area, dominance, as some operators became very big. And we, I was happy to say that was one of the areas that I worked a lot in and got some key wins.
Reflecting on your work in the competition regulation and telecoms governance, how would you assess the current regulatory environment and what changes would you recommend to foster the industry's growth?
As I always say, regulation is not static. It has to be dynamic. Now, of course, you like regulatory certainty, so you don't want it changing every day and flip-flopping, but you also want it to be fairly predictable. In one respect, and also to have that ability to change where there is need. And as you can see, there's a lot of change happening worldwide and not just nationally. So in that respect, I think the regulators are doing very well, following and working together. Some of the things that we've seen is even between MDAs, they tend to have MOUs where they can work with another ministry or another agency so that they partner and collaborate. I know there's one or two that I can think of between the NCC and the Ministry of Environment, the NCC and the Central Bank of Nigeria, having a regulatory sandbox where you can go and try things and experiment and then come back before you enact it into law. So those sorts of things have worked very well and should continue to happen. I think if there's any advice one could proffer, it would be just the speed at which some of these things happen could be a little faster. Yes, you have to go through a process and do a consultation, public hearing, get the comments back in, incorporate them before you enact a new regulation or guideline. So that can happen, but yes, I think a little bit of it can happen a little bit faster.
Okay, given your experience in the industry, what are your thoughts on the current agitation by telcos for tariff increase, and how do you suggest that the NCC, which has the final say on this, approach this issue?
In short order, I think it's needed. That's the honest truth. I do not know of any other industry where the prices have only gone one way, which is down. It's a tough time for everybody economically. Power costs have gone up. Fuel costs have gone up. Cost of doing business has gone up. Exchange rate has crashed. And it affects telcos directly or, instantly, in the sense that there's no telecoms equipment that is made locally. Let's not kid ourselves. So switches are made by 2 or 3 manufacturers worldwide. We all need them. Capacity is increasing. You have to go and buy these things and source your dollars at whatever rate you can find them. There's a lot of vandalism to equipment, so it gets damaged and needs to be replaced. So should there be a price correction? Yes, and I think it has to go up to support the industry and make it, continue to keep it where it is. This is an industry that has contributed between 8 and 12.5% to GDP over the last, 7 to 12 years. It's phenomenal. Don't kill the goose that lays the golden egg. The second part of your question, how can NCC do it? There is a defined process. It's called a cost model, whereby you look at all the network elements of an average operator and say, what does it cost to deliver this service? So from operator A, taking traffic to operator B, from my doorstep to your doorstep, and then, of course, for you to then deliver the last mile to the customer. So you do a cost model where you break down these cost elements of an average efficient operator and apportion costs to it. And at that point, you then have a base. That base should form what is economically a viable operator to deliver those services to the consumer. Thereafter, you then allow them to put a margin. Now, of course, you can't dictate what I should charge on what you should charge. You should give them freedom to, play within a band. I think it's actually in the works, if I'm not mistaken. There should be a determination very soon on that. And it sets a fair price at which, or a fair level at which costs are currently today. And then operators are then free to go and set their prices. And of course, if I'm delivering a certain kind of quality service, then I should be able to charge, and the market will dictate that. If you find I'm too expensive or my services are cheap and not terribly good, you will go to somewhere where you pay a slightly higher premium, but you're getting what you want. I believe there should be a correction and an upward correction in terms of tariffs.
Thank you. Considering the pivotal role that telecoms plays in virtually every phase of our lives, the way we live, work, and play, the current administration of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu has zeroed in on the digital economy. And the president has actually declared that is focusing on the digital economy to drive job creation and overall economic growth. What's your view on the administration's journey in this regard, considering that it's done over a year in that regard? Mm-hmm. And what would be your suggestion to enable the administration's accelerate the realization of the president's digital economy ambitions?
Okay. A year is not a very long time to go from a standing start to where we are currently today. I believe they've done very well. The Honorable Minister Tijani is, from the industry, so to speak. So he's hit the ground running, and it's very impressive what he's done. One of the key things that I think he's doing well and should continue to do is having this alignment between the different departments within the ministry. So you get the NCC to align a little more with NICHCOMSAT, to align more with NIPOST, and then Galaxy Backbone. So if you look at some of the policy directions that they've taken, for example, I think there's a digital bill going through Parliament at the moment, digital economy bill. That's a very good development. There is the issue of increasing the fiber by about 90,000 kilometers. That's fantastic. There's half our population is below the age of 30, so he's got the 3MTT, the 3 million tech jobs that we were trying to create. Fantastic. So those things you can see all try to address a key sector of the economy and a key pillar, which is infrastructure. Several state governments have also adopted that. I've had the privilege of meeting and speaking with Governor Sanwo-Olu of Lagos State, and he's one of those governors that I say gets it, and is very pro technology and certainly allowing tech ecosystem to thrive in Lagos. So, for example, you'll notice in the last 18 months, I think, there's something like 4 or so data centers being built in Lagos, and these are massive carrier data centers. What does that do? That means a lot of the cloud can now be localized in Nigeria. Fantastic. Once that is done, that means all that's left is the last mile, which is the fiber and the distribution around the country. And then once you have these tech hubs, which the minister is very familiar with, you're educating people, very quickly. Use of technology in government as well. I think they've talked about linking all the 774 local governments together by fiber. That allows for transparency, for speed, for getting services done very, very quickly. That's brilliant. So I think they get it. It's being done, and we will start to see more results, over time.
Giving your insight into the interplay between technology and regulation, what trends or technology innovations do you foresee having the greatest impact on Nigeria's telecoms and fintech space in the next decade?
The big elephant in the room is AI. That's going to be the big game changer. So you have AI coming down. Luckily, there's a policy again that government is pursuing around that. So that's very good, where we sound or look like we're going to be ready for that revolution. So that's brilliant. And our luck that we just have a very young population. So if we can harness and educate them, then we can leapfrog a lot of things and move to the forefront of that, change into digitization of almost everything. I think the key challenge we have is how do we deliver this infrastructure to some of our rural areas? It can't just be Lagos, Port Harcourt, Abuja, Kano, the main centers, which of course, have the big population, but also how do we get it to some of the smaller cities and rural areas? So how government works around that to deliver it in a cost-effective and quick manner using technology is going to be very interesting. That's something I'm keen on. So yes, I think AI is coming or is here. Content, and then also the creative economy. That's one area also that I've watched. We've got Nollywood, we've got music, we've got the arts, and there is a big convergence between that and technology. So your technology becomes the enabler to a lot of what we do. People can create a lot of content. Now AI with the large language models can help that content be done in all our major languages very easily. It was a little more difficult before, and having to have all this content and created offshore or somewhere else. Now you can do it in the local languages, you can teach in the local languages, you can trade and do all your commerce in those languages. So by the time you have that confluence of all of that, I think it'll be great. So,
you've in the course of your responses, you've worked a lot on the youth population in the country. So from that angle, can you share some of the leadership lessons you learned through your extensive career cutting across banking, information technology, telecoms, and others? Mm-hmm. And how have these experiences influenced you for the benefit of young people trying to learn from you to become another Ibrahim Dikko?
Oh, you're making me feel like an old fossil now. But I think stay curious, challenge the norm. With the way things are going, I learn a lot from my children, for example. If I want to get a new trend, I go and sit with them and listen to how they do things and how they think. And it's always usually left of field. So don't be afraid to challenge the norm. Very early in my career, I was very lucky to be working with a boss who gave me a lot of leeway. So when I was taking some documentation, for example, to central bank, my mandate would be, don't come back without the approval. So they would be told, okay, go back to Lagos and get that document redone and signed and so on. I wouldn't go back to Lagos. I'll go to the business center. I had, letterheads. I would, redo the letter, sign it, and come back 30 minutes later and drop it. And they'll be like, are you sure you're allowed to do this? I'm like, yeah, the only thing I'm not allowed to do is go back to Lagos without that approval. So I'm here till I do it. So you can challenge the norm sometimes, even at a young age. And I'll give you two anecdotes. One was when we started Etisalat Nigeria, one of our first number range was 0809. So we're thinking how, we had all these highly paid consultants, media team and so on, working with our marketing teams, thinking how are we going to do the advertising around this number. It wasn't as cool looking as 0802 or 3 or 0804 and so on. And while we're just standing in the corridor musing about this 0809, some engineer was just walking past and he said, oh, 0809, 0809 Nigeria. And we were like, that's it. And that's how 0809 Nigeria came. So it didn't come from, the convention. It came from, somewhere else. Some of the best guys I found in my time that I hired, one of them came from the call center. And now is working for a large multinational in technology as a director, and he did very well in regulation. So the old norm of, you come in, you start in the main room, you work your way up through 40 years before you become, the Oga or the manager. Really, sometimes, the idea of a manager in this new economy, digital economy, is somebody who's done 2-3 years rather than 12 years. But then yes, there's still something to be said for having a rounded education, a rounded experience, training, and so on. So yeah, continue to be curious, push the envelope, and never stop learning.
You're currently chairman of Fiber One, a major player in that internet space in Nigeria, but which has also found a niche in the enterprise and fiber to home space. What has the experience been like? What can we learn from you, or what is the experience you learned from the broader GSM industry come to factor in driving the growth of that business?
Thank you. Yes, I joined the board of Fiber One about 2 years ago now, and it's a very dynamic, led by a young CEO and founder that's doing very well in that space. Again, it's the provision of infrastructure, fiber to the home, and rolling out very quickly. One of the things that excites us is things like what I mentioned around governments supporting infrastructure providers. More fiber is being laid by government, so we can now do fiber swaps. I don't have to dig, so there's a dig once policy. A lot more governors are getting it around the country, and so rather than charge you arbitrary rates for rights of way, they're going to what the government suggests at the 140 naira per meter, because it's not getting the money from the service provider. It's a type of services and the ecosystem that comes from that you will, your citizens will benefit from. So as we continue to roll out nationally, both in cities and across in Lagos and across other cities, we're very pleased with the growth. I spoke about the localization of the cloud with the big data centers. That means the quality of the speed and latency will be almost nil, given we have a lot of undersea cable that terminates into Nigeria. So yes, I think it's a good space to be in, and certainly something where I'm very proud of and happy to be associated with.
Is there anything we may have left out in the course of the interview that you might want to add before we shut down?
Well, with you, it's very difficult to have left out anything. Your questions were very comprehensive. You have been in the industry, I think, even a bit longer than I have. So, yes, I think we've touched on a lot of aspects. And there's a lot to be bullish and excited about. I'm still very keen and happy to be working in the industry and to look at what is coming down the line.
You've interacted with Technology Times as a brand over the last couple of years. What do you have to say about Technology Times?
Don't stop what you're doing. We need specialized publications like yours that understand the industry, understand the technology and the challenges, and also celebrate what we bring to the table. You are a needed publication within the industry, and congratulations on your longevity and more success to you.
Thank you very much.
Pleasure.